All right, CNT125, Voice over IP Network Lab. In this, we just got done registering our phones and making a phone call or two, making sure everything is functioning on our network. We're now going to take a look at the protocols that are happening in the network. So take your other PC. This will be your Wireshark PC. In my example, I'm using the exact same PC I did in the last section, but I'm moving it. I actually unplugged the patch cable from the back of the phone, and I've moved it into my switch on port 11. So I'm now going to use this PC as my Wireshark PC, just so you can see everything that I'm doing. But take your other PC, connect it into port 11 on the switch. It needs to be port 11 because we're going to configure something on the switch to make this work. Next thing I need to do is configure it for static IP. So I'm going to open my network settings here real quick. Network and sharing, Ethernet 3, properties, IP4, and I'm going to look at my map. I said that this guy was going to be 172.16.0.10, 192, and 172.16.0.1. We'll say OK, close, close. I'm going to look at my IP config here real quick. We're now static, so I'm looking at that to make sure that's right, and it is. And I'm going to ping the 172.16.0.1. Ping 172.16.0.1. I should be getting my router. That way I know I'm on, basically I'm on VLAN 1 as a static node is what I am. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to move my console cable into the switch. So here I am, I'm into the switch now, enable. And I'm going to do something kind of unique. I'm actually going to take a handful of ports on the switch and have them monitor or mirror any traffic moving through them and send them to port 11. So any of the phone call traffic moving through these phone ports are going to get copied to port 11 so we can Wireshark it, so we can capture it. So here we'll do config T. We're going to say no monitor session all. No monitor session all. So if there was anything on there, we're taking it off. We're now going to set up a new monitor session. We're going to say monitor session 1 source interface. We're going to say these first 10 ports. These 10 ports on my switch. So monitor session 1 source is going to be these interfaces, interface fast Ethernet 0/1-10, and we want traffic in both directions. We want everything. We want all the traffic moving through. We're now going to say, okay, that's the source. So now we want to have the destination set. Monitor session 1, destination. We're going to say interface fast Ethernet 0/11. That's why it mattered which port we plugged into on the switch. So any traffic moving through these voice ports right now are going to get copied to port 11. And if I do an exit and show run on my switch, I'll see this. This actually shows up down at the bottom. Now here at the very bottom here is my monitor. Here's my port mirroring. So I will do a copy run start on this guy. So I have him. Now I'm going to minimize this guy. We are going to open Wireshark on this PC that I'm using. I'm going to open up Wireshark. And I might not see much because there's not much moving through right now. The phones are just sitting here idle. They're not doing anything. But I'm going to look at my Ethernet 3 as my network port. We're going to launch that guy. I can either highlight Ethernet 3 and do, click the shark fin, or I can double click on it, either one. We're going to start a capture. And now I'm going to issue a call between the two phones. So I'm going to do 7002, dial, let it ring, and then I'm going to answer. And I'm going to, pretend I'm talking on for a couple seconds here. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, it's going great. Weather's nice there. Okay, great. Hey, I'll be over later. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. And hang it up. Just enough that I have a bit of a phone call and make sure it hangs up. And then I'm going to come over here on my Wireshark, and I will stop my session. And as you see now, we got a couple thousand packets over here. That's what I want. I just captured a phone call, but it was just a phone call, just the phone call on my network, no other traffic. All right, now that I have that, let's take a look at what we got. So in the Wireshark Capture, let's look up here at the beginning. So I kind of scrolled up here to the beginning, and I'll see right in here, I'll see some of these skinny packets. This is what I want to look at first. Skinny is my setup protocol for our IP phone network. So we want to look at the info field and look for a couple things like this. We're going to see things like stop tone, keypad button. That's me actually pressing buttons on the phone. Sometimes you can open this up and actually see what button is being pushed. Yeah, here we go. I pushed the 0. Here's another keypad button. 2, 7002. If I go back here a little bit further, this might be 0. Go back a little further, here might be 7. Yeah, there you go, 7002. So here's all my keystrokes. If I go a little further, here's the lamp kicking on. Go a little further. Start tone, start dial tone, okay? So these are all the setup packets for my phone call. That's what I'm seeing. If I go a little further, I might even see some down here. Here's ringer. Here's set lamp, stop tone, okay? Well, take one of these. I'll come back here to where I press the button. I might actually see the button push. And I'm going to open this up, or I'll look in the middle window here, and let's look for a couple things. Look at the source destination IP, source and destination TCP port number. So look at source and destination IP, 120.11 to 128.1. So this is going from a phone to the router. TCP port, 5049, destination port 2000. That's skinny. That's SCCP protocol. And then here is the skinny protocol, and then there's my keypad button message. So these are the events to set up my phone call. This is why it's the setup protocol. Let's go down a little further and let's look at my RTP. So after the phone call got set up with skinny, we'll go down here a little bit further. Keep going, keep going, keep going. We now start seeing RTP. So I'm going to grab one of these, and there's thousands of them. And they're all very similar. So I'm going to grab one of the first ones there just so I don't lose track of where I'm at. I'll grab one of these first ones here. And again, let's open that up and take a look. Well, this is, RTP is our payload protocol. This is the one that's actually carrying the phone call. So I'll highlight one of these, and I'm going to look at kind of the same stuff I did before. If I look at the IP header, sources to 120.11 to 128.12. Yeah, this is going right between my two phones, directly between my two phones. So once it gets set up, the router hands it off, and the two phones talk directly to each other. I'm also going to notice over here that I see G711 again, pulse code modulation. G711 pulse code modulation. That's your codec. Keep a hold of that guy. All right, so there was my source and destination IP. I'm going to close that up for just a second. Let's look at we see UDP now, don't we? We see UDP. I don't see TCP, I see UDP. Looks like Mr. Brown has a typo there. We see UDP here. This is my user datagram protocol, just enough to get it from node to node. And then here is my RTP. And it even says in here the codec that's being used, and then here's the actual payload. There's my actual phone call. Now that looks odd, but that is encrypted. That is my payload data, but it's encrypted. Okay, that's my payload data, but it's encrypted. All right, well, let's graph this phone call. So I'm going to go up here to telephony. I'm going to go to voice over IP calls. And here's my two-way stream, if you will. Here's my two-way stream. So I'm going to highlight both of these. And I'm going to click, highlighted both, and I'm going to click flow sequence. And this will show literally the router talking to 128.11 and the router talking to 128.12. So there's actually the phone call process and how it happened. Showing all the states in there, showing the 2000 port number and so forth. So there's an actual graph of my phone call. Setting it up. In here, I start seeing the transfer of data. And then down here at the end, I see basically hanging up and closing down over here. On hook, all that kind of good stuff. Well, let's export this. Export this as a little graph. We'll say export. And I'm going to throw that into, I'm going to throw it in my documents. I have a folder here from my Voice over IP lab. So I'm going to put it in there. And I'll call this my Voice over IP phone graph. Yeah, phone graph. And I'll save that. Now I have a graph of that. That'll be saved. That'll be something I submit to show that I looked at my phone call. I saw it actually happening. I'll close all that. And while I'm here, let's save these packets. I'm going to save all these packets for submission to D2L as well. So I'll do File, Export Specified Packets. And I'm going to leave them all. I'm just going to grab them all this time. Again, I'm going to go to my, let's go to my, I don't want to go to my desktop. I want to go to my documents. So I need to go to my documents. Here we go. There's 125. Here's my voice over IP lab. There we go. And I'll call this guy my voice over IP packets or something like that. And I'll just leave, if I can spell, I'll leave this file extension, the pcapng. I'll leave that in there. I don't need to alter that. And I'll save that. Now I have a copy of my IP phone packets that I can look at later and or for this lab will submit. All right, I'll close that out. I don't need to save that. The only thing left to do is gather proof of my configuration. So I'm going to pull up my PuTTY again, and while I'm here, I'll grab my switch config. So actually I'll do a show run here. I'll do a new show run. And I'm going to save this configuration into a text file. Highlight that. Control C, open my notepad. I will paste that in. I will save that. And I'll call this my voice over IP switch config, something like that, CFG. That'll work. Save. So there's my switch config. I'll move my console to the router and get all my configs before I delete anything. So let me move my console over to my router. Okay, now that I'm in my router, I'm going to grab two things. While I'm here. I do obviously need the show run, because that'll have all my telephony config, my DHCP config, all that kind of good stuff. I need all that. So I'm going to scroll up here. I want to make sure I get it all, everything from my show run down. And again, that's going to show all of my config. So notepad again. Paste that in there. Again, as you scroll down through, there's my DHCP configs. There's my subinterface configs. There is my telephony config. There's my DN configs, my ePhone configs. Okay. So I will save this. And I'll call that voice over IP router config. RTR. I'm going to be nice and simple. RTR config. Now, while I'm here, I also want to see show ePhones. So we're going to do a show ePhone. And I'm going to do registered. I want to see the registered phones. So these are actually showing the phones are configured, plugged in, registered, and ready to call. This shows that you got everything up and functioning with your phones. So I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to copy this as well. Oh, doggone it. Get out of here. Yeah. That's what I want. There we go. Nice and clean. Mr. Brown crazy with the old copy here. Control C. Notepad again. Paste her in. There we go. There's my phones registered. So I'll do a save as. And I will do, what am I calling this guy? ePhones, yeah. Voice over IP, ePhone. There we go. All right, I have all my proof. So I'm going to, before I clean up, I'll double check that I have everything. So I'm going to open up my little folder here. I should have my, here's my graph. Here's my switch config. Here's my router config. Here is my ePhone. Here is my graph. And then here's my packets. So I have all the pieces I need. Now I can do cleanup. And I do have a couple questions I'll answer. So that'll be the last file, my questions from the lab. So for cleanup for this, it's really nothing we haven't done before. Just make sure on the router, erase start. And when you power down, all the any config in there will go away. And then on the switch, again, very carefully delete /VLAN.dat. And then erase start on the switch as well. When you power down, all the config will be gone there as well. Last but not least, these couple questions right here, they should be super simple by this point. Codec we looked at a couple times during the lab. The setup protocol, those were the first packets we looked at. The payload protocol were the second group of protocol packets that we looked at. And then last but not least, look up the model number phone you were using and what it would cost if we were to go buy one. You'll find that they're very plentiful and pretty cheap. But it'll give you an idea of the kind of phones that are out there too. So there is our IP phone lab.